I welcome you all on behalf of School of Arts and Aesthetics. It's a great pleasure to have you all here on the occasion of the book release, which has been written by our colleague, Dr. Brahma Prakash. And let me just say that this is the beginning of the semester or academic year, and we are starting our public programs with this book release function.
Everybody, thank you so much. This is a full house over here. Thank you all for turning up. And it's quite a power-packed panel that we have here to celebrate the book launch of this very, very critical publication that HarperCollins India is very proud to have brought out. I don't need to say much about the book. I guess a lot of you have already picked up your copies. The others who haven't can look it up in a bookshop, or we have our bookseller right outside. Do take a look at the book. This is one for the times. It is a seminal work of modern Indian cultural politics, and I urge you to read it. I will not take too much time over here. We have it on our highlights list, and we also have it on the bestseller charts already. We are very happy to see the reception that it is getting from readers, from retailers, from all across.
Good evening, everyone. I am Alpana Kumari, a CPS student from JNU. On behalf of JNU Academic, I welcome you all to today's discussion symposium on Professor Brahma Prakash's new book, Spectacle State, How Hindutva Shapes Feeling and Culture. Before introducing the speakers, I'd like to briefly introduce JNU Academic for those who may be joining for the very first time. JNU Academic is an independent student-led platform at Jawaharlal Nehru University. As a collective, we aim to enrich the university's academic culture by organizing discussions and engagements on issues of social and political relevance. Since we are entirely student-driven, we depend on voluntary contributions to sustain these initiatives. I'd therefore request you to consider contributing either through UPI or cash so that we can continue organizing more such discussions in the future. During the course of the event, we will circulate a QR code. Kindly scan the code and contribute to JNU Academics. Thank you. The book that is at the center of today's discussion invites us to critically reflect on one of the defining features of contemporary politics, the relationship between power, culture, and affect. It takes us on a path to understand how the contemporary state increasingly governs through spectacle, using performances, symbols, media, the public events to produce legitimacy, shape public emotions, and normalize political power. To engage with these ideas, we are fortunate to have with us an eminent panel of scholars and practitioners whose work speaks directly to questions of culture, politics, media, visuality, and social transformation. Allow me to introduce our distinguished panel of discussants. Sarovar Zaidi. She is a social anthropologist, teacher, and writer. She works at the intersections of critical theory, anthropology, art, architecture, and material cultural studies. She has extensively worked on religious architecture and urbanism in the city of Bombay and ran a site on writing about the city called Chirag, Delhi. Her current research focuses on religious iconography and images. She also curates an interdisciplinary forum on art, architecture, anthropology, Elementary Forms Guild, and has previously taught at the School of Planning and Architecture, Delhi. Our next panelist is Dr. Anirban K. Baishya. He is an alumna of School of Arts and Aesthetics, JNU, and is currently an assistant professor in the Department of Communications Arts at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. His research interests lie at the intersection of digital and visual cultures, with a particular emphasis on media aesthetics, ethics, and affect. He has extensively worked on Hindutva and its vital social media presence. We have been joined with Dr. Rahee Punyashloka. Dr. Rahee Punyashloka is an artist, writer, researcher, and an experimental filmmaker based in New Delhi and Bhubaneswar. He works with glitches, ghosts, subterranean genealogies to activate the Dalit body as a site of assertion and liberatory praxis. His recent exhibitions include Khoj, New Delhi, West Space, Melbourne, HKW, Berlin, among others. He is also the recipient of the FICA Emerging Artist Award 2025. The session will be moderated by Professor Nivedita Menon. Professor Nivedita Menon, former professor at Jawaharlal Nehru University, is a distinguished political theorist, feminist scholar, and public intellectual. She is the author of several influential books, and most recent being Secularism as Misdirection, Critical Thought from the Global South. She is also an active commentator on contemporary political issues through newspapers and the blog Kafila. Now it is my privilege to introduce the author of today's book, Dr. Brahma Prakash. Dr. Brahma Prakash is a writer, cultural theorist, and assistant professor of theatre and performance studies at the School of Arts and Aesthetics, JNU. He completed his PhD in theatre and performance studies from Royal Holloway University of London. He is the author of Cultural Labour, Conceptualizing the Folk Performance in India, Oxford University Press, and Body of the Barricades, Life, Art and Resistance in Contemporary India, Left World. His latest book, Spectacle State, How Hindutva Shapes Feeling and Examines How Spectacle, Emotion and Culture have become central to the exercise of political power in contemporary India. Dr. Prakash has published extensively in leading academic journals, edited volumes and public platforms, contributing meaningfully to conversations on culture, democracy and politics.
Thank you so much. And I express my deep gratitude to all of you because I know you have joined me despite of the fact that things are more interesting outside. And I think I would have loved to join outside than what I'm doing it here. So I'm deeply honored to see many of my friends, my colleagues, teachers, students and activists here. And then I really thank all of you. My sincere thanks to also publisher, panelists who have really agreed to be part of this panel, and also our staff members who was helping me to organize this event here. So I would like to thank them, and also thanks to JNU Academic Forum and the School of Arts and Aesthetics in that way. So only a few days back when I was writing about when this whole idea about how a spectacle was when I was trying to end this book, A Spectacle State, and then I was trying to look for some kinds of alternative. What is going to be the alternative? Is there a way out? Then the things were looking so terrifying and so powerful, A Spectacle State was looking so powerful that making any convincing argument was looking so superficial for me, that whether I am right to make this argument. But we have seen that how within a days, that how a spectacle state appears to be crumbling down. And I think we all are happy with this some kinds of things that is churning outside in our contemporary time and our very much in our present time. So a spectacle state appears quite invincible until it's burst into pieces. And I think that is what we are appearing for. But at the same time, we know that when I'm talking about a spectacle state, then I'm also talking about some kinds of cultural pervasive of some kinds of ideology that has gone to another level. So whether you are thinking about food, whether you are thinking about clothing, whether you are thinking about different other kinds of cultural practices, I don't think that is going to go away so soon. Even something massive, some kinds of other things happens that we are witnessing currently. So, and then I was in a kind of when I was trying to end this book, I was in a kind of very desperate situation to find some examples, that where I can find some examples to critique of this spectacle state. And then I would like to read out that what I have written. So while concluding, one thinks if there is a way out of a spectacle state, one think of hope, resistance and solidarity. Where do we find them? They not necessarily always exist outside. And in John Verger's words, hope is then something to bite on, to put between the teeth. Hope lies even between the teeth of bulldozer and before it gets cracked. Hope, resistance, solidarity have to emerge from within, exposing the false unity of a spectacle state and revealing its deep crisis. Sooner or later, the spectacle state has to come to an end simply because it is a performance and it has to end. Or perhaps one can rise in race like Punjabi poet Avtar Singh Pass, and that is the way I end this book, claiming a rightful end of the spectacle state by a citizen in, and he has this very beautiful poem, Mera hoon haq banda hai, ye mera haq banta hai, I deserve my right. Hindi translation is not that poetic that way. So this is the English translation I'm trying to read out here. I have seen your theatre of democracy. After paying the full ticket price, I would like to repeat, I have seen your theatre of democracy after paying the full ticket price. Now I deserve my right to scream and shout and tear down the curtains and throw the chairs out. And that is his kind of end of the spectacle stage. So, and that is the point I'm trying to make. So while we can be very happy with the situation, we perhaps want to see the end of the spectacle state of Hindutva, but we also need to accept that it has gone very, very pervasive. The hatred that has entered our bone and home are not going to change in days and months. The resistance must enter into our everyday life to counter this hate. It's because more than ideology, Hindutva has emerged as a powerful mobilizing force. Before it captures your mind, it captures your body. And that is the argument I'm trying to make, because there are a lot of writings around Hindutva where people are talking about more ideological kinds of reading, but either you are thinking about Hindutva pop, either you are thinking about fascination for bulldozer, either you are thinking about fascination for monuments. It is first you get fascinated, then you may get ideologically motivated or not. And that is the point I'm trying to make here, and that becomes a kind of crux of the argument in this book. I will just briefly go with the chapterization and to give you a structure of the book. The book has 8 chapters, including an introduction that tries to conceptualize a spectacle state, how different ways we can theorize a spectacle state. Each chapter focuses on one image object, and many times this is the object. So for example, bulldozer is an object, but bulldozer can also become an image. And that is the connection continuum. We can see that you have either you are talking about H-pop. H-pop is very much soundscape or some kinds of sound, but it also comes as some kinds of vibration of image. So it is quite difficult to make a distinction between, say, image and object in that way. And therefore, each chapter takes one object image kinds of continuum to make some kinds of analysis of a spectacle state. So for example, when I discuss about H-pop, then I'm talking about some kinds of a scaling of sound or some kinds of loudness of sound, and that becomes a kind of mode of analysis. Loudness becomes a point. Same way in a chapter I talk about sword. I'm talking about what is the caste of sword. I'm talking about caste society and why suddenly you see the surge of sword everywhere across the procession. So when sword appears in public, then what its signature, what it tries to indicate for us and how we can read it. So all the chapters are trying to make the connection of the spectacle state in a very different ways. So you have monuments where I'm talking about a scaling, because either you're talking about 20 highest monuments now across the world, and I think that is in India. So that says, but again, you also have a whole hatred for monuments. So either you're thinking about Muslim monuments or some kinds of sites, then they are getting demolished. So what is happening in between?
You would have got an idea from Brahm's own presentation what this book is doing, right? It's offering us a view into Hindutva, which is very different from the ways in which it is normally spoken about. Because he goes beyond talking about the aesthetics of Hindutva. The way he puts it, and I thought that was quite striking, the way he puts it is that you can think about Hindutva as deploying aesthetics to mobilize its politics, or, and I think this is how he's arguing it, this is how he's making the argument, or we can think of Hindutva fundamentally as a project of the aesthetization of politics. He's quoting Benjamin. So if Hindutva is a project, so in other words, aesthetics is not a marginal to or incidental to the politics of Hindutva. He's making quite a strong argument that it is about a particular mode of aesthetizing politics, so that I think the way I understood this book, so that there's a way in which, without being trained in Hindutva, without going to Saraswati Mandir, without going to or reading Organizer, you just enter a space where, for example, Hitler Chowk appears to be a place where young Dalit Bahujan men can produce a certain kind of masculinity. So I thought that was really interesting. It's a bit like the phrase that came to my mind was "Jab koi cheez rag rag mein basta ho." So it's that rag rag mein basna wala andaz of this of Hindutva that he's talking about here. The way it's able to both create and tap into certain kinds of formations which are complementary to Hindutva. So you may not be part of the main project, but you're contributing to it by being part of all these spaces. So I found that fascinating. And as you know, Brahm uses for a hardcore academic like me, it's very enchanting to hear phrases like "hope lies in the teeth of a bulldozer," as he just said, and also he said the spectacle state is invisible until it bursts into.
Dr. Brahma Prakash asks us not to dismiss Hindutva's cultural forms, but to take them head on and use them as an avenue for introspection. To much of the middle class, some of these forms may feel uncultured, But I think that is precisely the kind of complacency that allows a politics based on hate to fester and grow. As he powerfully points out, there's an aesthetics to this, and this aesthetics is not only found on theater stages or canvases or film screens, it's there as well, but it also suffuses the very atmosphere in which we live, the air that we breathe, the thoughts that we are allowed to think. So it's not a coincidence, I think, that the subtitle of the book points us towards the shaping of feeling and culture. Through his focus on culture, he reminds us that aesthetics is a powerful force. It can also be a dangerous one. It's through aesthetics that an ideology of hate becomes our reality. It's through aesthetics that propaganda begins to feel like not ideology, but almost like nature. It's almost natural. As he writes in the prologue, it, that is Hindutva politics, functions at the level of the body and the senses. It seeks to turn politics into a sensuous performance. And thought those were very beautiful words to put this. In other words, there's an electrifying charge to Hindutva politics that to its supporters, I would imagine, feels empowering, and in a perverse sense, there's also an erotics to this, and we'll get to this in a bit. I think the best examples of this in the book are in the discussion of the bulldozer and the sword, which he spoke about a while ago. When they become more than just machines or tools, they facilitate a performance of strongman politics that is cutter, hardcore, uncompromising, even ruthless. At the same time, swords and bulldozers cease to be mere signs or symbols of power. They transcend machinery and governance and become an extension of masculine virility itself. In that sense, as he approaches it, Hindutva aspires to be a total work of art in which music, visual culture, and even warfare come together. Spectacle is not one film, not one set of songs, or one visual image. It is everything put together. It is ideology as an aesthetic, and aesthetics as ideology. And this is perhaps where the spectacle takes center stage as the key analytic in this book, not for the writing, which was beautiful and poignant, but because of the sheer weight of its subject. And this is the last chapter, Frozen Meat, which takes on the subject of lynching. This chapter begins with the description of the extreme pain and degradation leveled on the body of Muhammad Ishaq into 2023, with the video of the torture leading to his eventual death being circulated virally as a meme with music. Such incidents, of course, have become increasingly common in India over the last decade, where the violation and suffering of the body of the other forges a kind of a perverse imagined community. As Spectacle State shows us, there is a pleasure in this too. For the perpetrators, whereby the screaming and the suffering body of the Muslim man becomes a confirmation of one's own sense of power and security in the social hierarchy. This too is perhaps the extreme, cruelest form of the total work of art, wherein the body of the minority individual, whether Muslim or Dalit, becomes a canvas or a platform to stage the spectacle of power. That in itself is not new. I mean, this kind of violence has been in this country for ages. What is new is the recording, remixing, and the mimification of the act of violence, where different media forms converge to showcase Hindutva in its most true form as a politics of sheer dominance and carnal violence. He writes, lynching is in a way a transparent violence. I like that phrase, whose primary rasa is jouissance or enjoyment. In every act of lynching, mobs find jouissance in killing and fleeting sense of security that is never going to be fully attained. Its connection with aesthetics gets more concretized after the murder of the victim. Unquote. The video recording is one such artifact, but as he shows us, there are other forms too, such as dioramas of violence that are now blatantly displayed in rallies across India. He later says, lynching kills our emotions and feelings and desensitizes us to core human values more so when it acquires an aesthetic gaze. And this is where it becomes an object of consumption. And I think here too there is a very strong connection with the idea of the spectacle. If the spectacle as an ideology is an all-engulfing capsule outside of which there is nothing, then the form of this aesthetic, if we go by the logic of this desensitization, is almost anesthetic. Just say surgery ke pehle jo anesthesia dete hain, it numbs you, right? It stops you from feeling. You know it's working, but it stops you from feeling. Like anesthesia, Hindutva's aesthetics numbs feelings. It becomes a phantasmagoria from which one can seemingly not opt out. One can either be a victim or a perpetrator or a voyeur in this arrangement. The victim is the figure of extreme pain. The latter two are the locus of pleasure and power, even if it's sadistic pleasure. And one thing this chapter does really well, I think, is tie it back to other histories of lynching. As for example, in America, where brutalized black bodies similarly became the center of carnival of pain that people would throng to see. So there, as he tells us, there are numerous photographs of these scenes of lynching where people would go with their children, almost like it's a fair, right? It's a spectacle. As and when you read the book, since many of you have picked up copies, I would encourage you to also listen to Billie Holiday's song Strange Fruit that he writes very beautifully about in relation to this. This is a very haunting chapter that actually makes you feel rather than coldly analyze the phenomenon of lynching. I would go as far as to say that if Hindutva is an anesthetic, then the writing in this chapter is the exact opposite form. It's an aesthetic that forces you to see and feel the encounters of an ideology of hatred. All this to say, and I want to end with this, and this is an ending that I've drawn from him. There is always hope. As he writes in his epilogue, once the spectacle is challenged, the fall begins. And what better time to be talking about challenging the spectacle than now, when thousands are thronging in the heart of the city, even as we sit here, to sing, mock, and meme against autocracy.
I think that is something that I would really want to thank him on. And I think we've all had conversations on things like this. But he's given us that blueprint document to kind of continue to see what happened and how did it happen. That this book addresses, for me at least, it addresses the loneliness of the last 10 years. It is a loneliness which I think, the person who talks about this most is Hannah Arendt in her book Origins of Totalitarianism. And there is a loneliness, there's an anger that you have felt and that one has felt lost. I don't know if this is something that many people in JNU feel or otherwise, but I have felt it. There is a loss of meaning, there is a loss of language, words, the idea of what is the political, what is the self. And there is a certain kind of deafening alienation that one has also gone through in thinking about these things that are going on around us. I'm just saying this as a personal thing. And there has, of course, been ideological, social, bureaucratic, and everyday alienation of life, thinking, teaching. And for me, this book also makes me less lonely.
We can kind of overcome the most central image in South Asian history, arguably, which is the image of Brahman, where, like the head belongs to the priest and so on and so forth. And underneath the feet, there exists the excluded body. So I'll start with a very short quote of mine from another essay, and then I will move into my response. In the beginning, there was the body of the Brahman, the supreme being. This is the most enduring metaphor in South Asian history. Brahman, who becomes Brahma, who becomes a diagram, which becomes a metaphor, that becomes a framework, that becomes difference, which becomes people. The unprescribable, the exhumed, the other that the Dalit is, belongs outside of this body. The enduring inheritance of this metaphor puts my people lower than Brahma's feet, which suggests a subterranean ontology. I am, in short, the cosmological underground. So, this question of underground has kind of pushed me to think of the bulldozer and its teeth in a different context because, it attempts to unearth in some capacity. When it starts off, of course, like Brahm mentions in the bulldozer chapter about how it's, of course, like always been it has always been created with the doctrine of bulldozing racialized bodies, minorities, in the case of Israel-Palestinian bodies, and in more recent times in India, Dalit and Muslim bodies. But there is somehow, there is a um, infrastructural validation that it gets from being something that actually can open the earth up. And that is somewhere taken as an excuse, taken as a, like proto function to justify a lot of the flattening that Ram also speaks about, that keeps happening throughout in this country right now. I actually worked on a sculpture around the bulldozer teeth, and you will see in front of the stage there are two bulldozer teeth. They are these very sculptural entities, and I wonder what their like existence outside of the context of a like bulldozing machine itself, as these tiny sculptural entities, like what that can do. Is that a religious function? Is that a image which is spectacular? So I would urge everybody to like feel free after the discussion to just come and like look at it, touch it, and like experience the tactility of the bulldozer teeth. I'll move on to the response now. The aesthetic register of Hindutva proceeds through a constant reduplication of the image of the spectacle. This image of the spectacle operates not as a singular image, but rather through an additive operation. Unlike the striking monumentality of the archival photo of a lynching, here there must be a sporadic but frequent determination of the spectacle for its validity and consecration to remain intact. In this way, Hindutva's spectacular thinking is remarkably coherent with the logic of algorithmic internet virality, that too of the trend. This is not a surprise when we place the timeline of the current ruling regime, allowing for the acceleration of Hindutva's spectacular thinking and the ways in which internet history proceeds concurrently at that time. Hindutva's registration of the spectacular is unthinkable without the aura farming reel, the WhatsApp forward, and as Brahm points out, the viral video, which has a jarring contrast between the bodies being subjected to spectacular violence, juxtaposed with cool songs accompanying them. The 4G and 5G revolutions were the biggest achievements of this government precisely because they could make the precondition for the installation of the Hindutva image. A trend posits a ritual whose aesthetic accomplishment is to repeat certain dance moves or body movements interlaced with a segment of a trending song. When reels were introduced, and this happened right before 2020, like which is why the COVID instances were mentioned. So essentially, like it starts off with the introduction of reel. Like it's not like the reels accelerate. It like yeah, so it just like sort of happens. When reels were introduced, there was a brief conversation about attributing the creator of a trend, but quickly this notion was discarded by the volume of creators who would jump on a trend to imitate it and gain virality due to the algorithm preferring this specific ritual image protocol. Soon, the ahistoric decontextualized image became a de facto. A content creator's identity or uniqueness was not a requisite, but rather that they can accurately repeat the trend, quite literally becoming a data body without organs. This logic was, strangely, challenged by TikTok, where people from tier 2, tier 3 cities would record themselves doing the most mundane things, far away from the economy of the assimilable trend. An entirely new logic of the image would emerge. Views and virality were not driven by the axis of algorithmic control, but rather of random attention grabbing. In one of my favorite TikToks from when it briefly lived in India, a group of young boys in the late teens and early 20s were recording a distant relative who had also taken them to work as bonded laborers somewhere in a sugarcane farm in Maharashtra. These boys would smile and give galis to the guy on camera before turning it quickly to him resting on top of a tractor. The minute he turns to look at them, they'd pretend to be working. This logic of the anti-spectacular is exactly what a platform like TikTok threatened and what the chronically recording students at the protest right now at Jantar Mantar threatened to break out of. It is no wonder that TikTok was banned by the Modi government. The government has probably considered ensuring that one cannot use Instagram and similar apps to record anything in and around the protest site, but alas, that would mean nor could the Hindutva goons who want to produce a counter image, who want to produce the spectacle. Only through repetition, volume, and accumulation does the image of the spectacle turn into the spectacular image. But Hindutva and Brahmanism are also afraid of volume and of ungovernable mass, which is why they veer away from the subterranean metaphorology, from thinking with solid ground and thinking with cavernous paths of the underground. The spectacular image is not a pure image. It is quite literally an image that is witnessed via the spectacle. There is refractive index involved. There is a vision chart, which is why morphing this image through the flatness of both the demolished site and body, but also of the flat LCD screen is imperative. One wouldn't know what to do with all the accumulation of the spectacular images of lynching if it were not for the possibility of a renewal. And this renewal in turn is predicated on the smoothing out of the site over and over and over. The viral image is also a poor image in the sense that it cannot endure. It must be pushed into the trending section of the imaginary, recreated by the endless Hindutva content creators for it to hold its spectacularity intact. The flattening rituals of the bulldozer and the flattened image have progressed in our contemporary image making infrastructures in tandem. I always wonder what the purified Brahminized version of the spectacular image can be. Brahminism insists on incalculable scale constantly to ensure that the profane order does not assimilate into a meaningful challenge. What then could be a pure image which registers this zeitgeist while also not having to interface with the scopic operation of the spectacle? When I look at the thousands of disused bulldozer teeth in Mayapuri scrapyard, I wonder if this can be it. Bulldozer teeth that are not strictly usable for actively forming the rubble and cause flattening, but still holding value as objects. Maybe an occasionally corrupt contractor or skilled operator can make some of these blunt teeth work still. Otherwise, they'll remain in this market, holding traces of the destruction and ruin they caused before retirement. I wonder if an accelerationist mode of thinking will be to consecrate these as mythological objects, anoint them with sindoor, and build temples wherever each teeth did its last destructive dance. Yeah, thank you.
Sarovar said something that for me was quite striking. She said that that this is a master historical record of the last 10 years. It's the master historical record of an epoch. And I think it's quite striking that it is released and we are reading it at what might be the beginning of the end of that epoch. Or at least the beginning of the dismantling of that epoch. And so I want to, my contribution to the panel is to think about how in the last 10 to 12 years we have known theoretically, but we have forgotten that structures are not in fact closed, structures are not in fact stable. We have a reason. There's a reason why we knew that theoretically but couldn't believe that to be the case, because we were in a very stable universe created by what Brahm calls the spectacle state. And I want to leave you with a question about the instability of structures. But let me first read a small part of Brahm's book, where it's a very disturbing book, I think, from the panelists you would have got a sense. But the frozen meat chapter, the section called the art installation of lynching. And in that, he talks about, I'm quoting now a small part where he talks about lynching at a time carries three combined but contradictory perspectives together. First, from the points of view of who kills and who gets killed, the executioner and the executed. Second, from the spectator's point of view, who sees with pleasure and who watches and feels the pain. Third, from the point of view of the staging of the victim's body. Lynching displays a body with specific details, hands tied, body stretched, almost like an installation work. Lynching becomes a perfect installation. And then he goes on to talk about how an installation transforms a space into an immersive experience for spectators. And in many ways, this is what we have lived with, this immersive experience where we were living in a world where the installation was us. We were all part of the installation, and it seemed that all we could do was be part of that installation. But if we start dwelling a little on the second part, the second sentence that he said of what I just read, which is there are 2 points of view of that spectacle: one who watches with joy and one who watches with pain. We are reminded that these symbols and these structures are polysemic. We know that. I'm sitting in the SAA auditorium, right? Everyone knows that they don't carry a single meaning. But for so long have they seemed to carry a single meaning that we forgot that when you see the picture of, for example, the 2002, person begging for his life, the Muslim man begging for his life, and the Shiv Sena guy with his triumphantly with his sword aloft. It's literally like, the rabbit and that figure which you see as a rabbit and as a head, because one would feel, certain people would feel joy at one image and other people would feel joy at the other, or joy or sadness at the other image. So I wanted to ask Brahm too. He did write the book. I think he completed the book in that arc of triumphalism of Hindutva in India. But if he were to write an epilogue today, would he consider and dwell a little bit more on the porousness of these images and how they are received? They're not always received with delight. They're received with anger. They're received with sense of humiliation. They're received with a sense of vengeance, vengeance from the point of view of justice. That is, people who feel this is so unfair. This is unbelievably unjust and unfair. And I'm thinking of, for example, the angry Hanuman image, which is also a chapter in his book. And I remember at that time I learned, and I mean, everyone was talking about it, everyone could see it. One had never seen Hanuman represented in that way. And then I was very interested to learn that it was a Malayali artist, right, who had created this image in the context of a temple, apparently. But he didn't mean it to be aggressive. He meant it to be strong. But of course, it became this aggressive, angry Hanuman. So I just want to know if you had written an epilogue or to this book, or if when this book comes out hopefully in a different epoch, in a second edition, how I would really like to know how you would talk about that, because it was really impossible to talk about it, right? It had become impossible. So I found myself thinking, what is it that when the spectacle state sees through its spectacles? So there's also that, right? There's also that element or that meaning of the word spectacle. How do the people present themselves? What is the counter presentation to the spectacle state? So in some senses, I think, and I mean, this is just an idea that I had, that it seems as if every individual person there is producing themselves as spectacular. So there is a kind of way in which every person feels, every young person there feels spectacular, feels magical, feels beautiful, feels strong, feels the community. And everyone who thought that social media is just something alienating, obviously that there is a way in which it can be translated on the ground. So this reception of images and how everything seems forever until it is not, which is the title, I think, of a book on the Soviet Union. Yeah, I'd like to close with that. But I'd really like to know how you would talk about this in an epilogue. Thank you.